Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, it is day 2 of MACtion. MACtion, which is one of my favorite times of the college football season, when the MAC conference plays their games on Tuesday and Wednesday nights in November, and all craziness ensues, has kicked off. And we're going to talk about this second MACtion slate, which is on Wednesday, November 6, 2024. We're going to be breaking down both games from a DFS perspective on DraftKings as well as FanDuel. We're going to tell you what you can expect from each game, as well as who you need to be targeting for your DFS lineups in each game. Now, if you're watching this before the Tuesday slate kicks off, make sure you go check out the Tuesday episode because we recorded that and released it early as well. But this one we're recording here on Monday night, going to hopefully get it out at least by Tuesday morning. So hopefully you guys have plenty of time to prep for this Wednesday night slate. We've got 2 games on the Wednesday night slate. They're a little bit different from the Tuesday night slate, a little bit different teams than what we're going to see on the Tuesday night slate. So definitely a lot of interesting things are going to happen in these 2 games, and we're going to hopefully be able to predict all of it. Now, if you have not already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. That way you can be with us for the rest of the college football season, as well as the rest of our college basketball content now that season has kicked off as well. And you'll just be notified when all the episodes drop, right? If you're subscribed, because I can't promise that I'm going to be here for every MACtion slate, for every Thursday, Friday slate, whatever. But I do know that if you're subscribed, you'll know when we drop and you can get that content immediately. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in. We got 2 games to talk about, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, so game number 1 does feature what I would consider to be one of the worst teams in all of FBS football, and that is Kent State. They are being greeted by Ohio in a little bit in-state rivalry action. So Ohio is 18.5-point favorites with a game total of 52.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 35-17 in favor of Ohio. We never round off, or we always round off when we do implied totals because you can't actually go out and score 0.25 of a point. So Ohio projected total of 35 points. That is the highest projected team total on the slate. And I feel like you got to get a piece of this Ohio offense. Like I just don't see a way where this team just completely fails here in this game. Like I said, Kent State is arguably the worst team in all of FBS football. They could very well finish this season 0-12. That doesn't mean they're not going to score any points in this game, but I just don't see them holding Ohio completely scoreless, right? Like their defense is not good in either category. Ohio is one of the best teams in the MAC. I just see this being a situation where Ohio's offense is going to score some points and you're going to want a piece of it. Ohio is a team that also likes to get it done by running the football. They rank 35th in the nation in rush rate. So this is going to be a team that you kind of know how they're going to want to get their points. And their quarterback, Parker Navarro, is a big part of that rushing game. Double-digit rushing attempts in each of the last 4 games, which have all been conference games. And he's averaging 25 fantasy points per game in conference play. He's just done it in a weird way because 2 of the games are over 35 DraftKings points. One of them's right around his average at 24, and the other one's 5. So I really don't expect this to be another 5. If you were to kind of throw out that outlier of 5, he would be averaging a little over 30 DraftKings points per game in conference play. So I really do think that Parker Navarro is probably the best quarterback play this slate. Yes, he's expensive. Yes, he's going to kind of hamper what you can do with the rest of your lineup, but I think he's worth it. He's on the team with the highest implied total. He's got a lot of rushing upside, and he's shown the ability that he can score a lot of DraftKings points in this MAC conference. I've kind of harped on these last 2 MACtion shows the importance of looking at conference-only stats. The MAC teams, they play a really tough non-conference schedule. A lot of them play bye games. So you're getting a look at what they do against like-quality competition when you just look at their conference play games. Now, at the running back spot for Ohio, Anthony Tyus is likely to miss this game. I don't want to say for sure, but I haven't seen anything that indicates that he's going to be returning anytime soon. So that leaves Ricky Hunt and Nolan McCormick as the 2 backs in the backfield. In the one game that Tyus missed so far this season, Ricky Hunt had 9 carries in that game, and Nolan McCormick had 11. So you're looking at a committee if Anthony Tyus is out. Granted, McCormick's 11, most of them came in garbage time, so I do think Hunt would get the start, and I do think if this game were close, Hunt would see a majority of the carries. But this is a 17.5-point spread. This game can very well turn into a blowout, and it could turn into a McCormick game. So I do think you're taking on a little bit of risk with either of these 2 running backs, but I also do think that this is a team that wants to win by running the football, and they're going to be running it with one of those 2. There's not going to be some mystery man that emerges. So I am going to be taking shots at both of them in my lineups. At the wide receiver position, there's really only one guy we need to talk about. That's Coleman Owen. He is very clearly their wide receiver one. He has their entire team doubled up in terms of catches and yards this season, and he is the only Ohio Bobcat with more than one receiving touchdown, of which he has 5. I really just think you can just very easily, hey, if you're playing Parker Navarro, just click Coleman Owen. Yeah, it's going to cost you a lot of money, but it should be worth every penny because the receiving options on this slate are not super great or super consistent. He is one that is. I do think that he's probably the best receiving option on this slate. Now, the other two that you do need to consider are Hendricks and Harris. They are the only other regular contributors. Sorry, y'all, it's quite late at night as I'm recording this. They're the only other regular contributors to this wide receiver room. They're really the only guys that you need to consider, in my opinion. But here's the problem: is that they're quite expensive too. Hendricks is sitting there at $5,500. Harris is there at $4,900. Why would I not just get the guy who's more than doubled up their production at just $1,700 more dollars? It doesn't make sense to me that they're up in the 5K range when Owen is in the 7K range. That just doesn't really track to me. So Owen is certainly going to be my favorite stacking partner for quarterback Parker Navarro, of which I'm going to be playing a lot of. On the Kent State side, now, like I said earlier, just because they're one of the worst teams in FBS football doesn't mean that they're not going to score any points on this slate. This is an offense that has had a little bit of success. They just really can't play defense. And they do rank 54th in the nation in rush rate, so this is a team that does want to run the football. Their quarterback is Tommy Uwatowski, who has a very slight modicum of rushing upside. Not a lot, but just a little bit. He's only $6,200 though, and he does have 2 performances this season of over 32 DraftKings points. In fact, when you look at his 4 conference games, you've got 32, 32, negative 0.88, and 16.5. Like that's quite the line. So this is a guy that does have a wide range of outcomes. If you think that Kent State keeps this game close, or if you want to do a game stack, I can't complain about that strategy. Like, I think that's a possibility. And if it does, it's going to be through the arm and legs of Tommy Uwatowski. At the running back position, Kai Thomas is their guy. He's had at least 14 carries in each of the last 3 games, which have all been conference play. Last week, he led over Caleb Douglas, 15 carries to 9. So, Kai Thomas is very clearly the 1A in this backfield, but Caleb Douglas will see a little bit of carries as well. I'm sorry, Curtis Douglas, not Caleb Douglas. Caleb Douglas plays for Texas Tech. What am I thinking? So, yeah, Kai Thomas over Curtis Douglas. I would rather just pay up $800 more to get Kai Thomas than to play Curtis Douglas. That's just how I see it. Like I said, this is a team that projects to be losing most of the game. It's really hard to imagine a running back hitting a ton of fantasy points. Now, I do think you can get to these 2 Kent State receivers with or without the Kent State quarterback, because that's where a lot of the production is going to come from. Krishan McCray and Luke Flourier are by far the 2 most productive receivers on this Kent State team. They combined for 61 of Kent State's 99 receptions so far this season. They're really the only 2 guys that you really need to consider. McCray is great. Like, he's a really good athlete, has a ton of upside. We've seen him do it against good competition. We've seen him do it in conference play. He has games of 38 and 50 DraftKings points this season. So a ton of upside from McCray. I don't mind it at all. And then Flourier is kind of more of a consistent producer, doesn't have the quite same ceiling as Krishan McCray, but does see equal bit as involvement. It's just spread out over more games than what McCray's had with the 2 nuclear games. So I'm absolutely going to be playing both of them in my lineups. Probably not both of them in the same lineup, but definitely, kind of just, getting exposure to both of them along the way. The other guys that play regularly are Etheridge and Muldowney, but I really just would rather just play McCray or Flourier from this side. All right, let's go ahead and take a quick breather before we want to break down at game number 2. Now, before we continue, I do want to mention there are places where you can get more information from me. First off, you can follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. I'm more than happy to answer any questions if you reach out to me on Twitter. I also try to put as much show updates as possible on Twitter. Some days I'm better about that than others, but if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. I'm also in the Fantasy Corner Discord. Link is in the description on YouTube as well as on the audio feed. If you are looking for a community of a bunch of really smart, really good people to talk DFS with, Fantasy Corner Discord is the place for you. We got people in there all hours of the day, bouncing ideas off each other, talking lineups, talking strategies, and a lot of people that are really good at uncovering injuries and whether or not guys are going to be available for games, which certainly is a big helpful tool as well. And then, once the games start, we're in there sweating it out together. College football is one of the sports with the most active chats in there, but we also got NBA, NFL, college basketball has been really jumping. And so if you're just looking for more people to talk DFS with, Fantasy Corner Discord is the place for you. And if you watch these videos and you're like, who actually makes all of Mike's lineups? Head on over to the Patreon, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. I post my core plays for every single college football DFS slate, as well as the reason why they make my core plays in an article form. So if you want to know who makes my lineups and you want to kind of get some information, get some research, and help become a better college football DFS player, Patreon is the place to go for you. All right, so now let's go ahead and get started talking about game number 2. It's going to be a little bit of a closer game. In fact, this is projected to be the closest of all 4 of the MACtion games. It is Northern Illinois heading over to Kalamazoo to take on Western Michigan. Northern Illinois is 2-point favorites in this game with a game total of 52.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 27-25 in favor of the Huskies. Now, for Northern Illinois, this is a team that wants to win by rushing the football. They rank 26th in the nation in rush rate. Their counterpart on the other side, Western Michigan, ranks 22nd in the nation in rush rate. So with all these teams running the football, I don't know, man. The total of 52.5 kind of seems high to me. Like, I really just, I really think that these two teams are going to be running. It's going to be grinding clock out. It's a Wednesday game. It's a weird environment. I struggle to see how this game gets to 52.5. But hey, that's where Vegas set the line at. So for Northern Illinois, this is a team that loves to run the football, but Western Michigan is actually statistically one of the worst pass defenses in the nation. They give up over 277 passing yards per game. Now, the bad news, if you're Northern Illinois, though, is Ethan Hampton has not been a great fantasy quarterback so far this season. He has not had a game where he scored more than 18 DraftKings points against FBS competition. Now, why is that number 18 important? Well, that would be 3 times value for his salary, which is like the bare minimum for success in college football DFS. You really want everybody to get 3 times value for their salary. And Ethan Hampton just hasn't done that against FBS competition. So there's, if there's any time for him to do it, it might be against one of the worst pass defenses in the nation in Western Michigan. And Western Michigan hasn't exactly played a murderer's row of quarterbacks either. So I do think that this is a pass defense that can be had. Ethan Hampton is going to give you a little bit of rushing upside as well. So I don't think he's a bad play. Personally, it's really kind of hard to quantify him against Parker Navarro. I think they're in different leagues. But, if you're looking for a second quarterback to play, Uwatowski, Hampton, and the next quarterback we're going to talk about, Hayden Wolf, they all have their merits. And I think that, it all depends on the type of lineup, the type of story that you're trying to tell. And I could see myself playing a little bit of Hampton. But like I said, I'm going to be playing a ton of Parker Navarro from the first game. And I'm probably going to be mixing in the other 3 quarterbacks, Uwatowski, Hampton, and Wolf. As of right now, I have them fairly close to even to each other. As we get closer to lock, though, maybe one of them might emerge as my guy. Now, at the running back spot for Northern Illinois, this is a committee, but Ontario Brown is usually the leader of that committee. He's been their best back the last 2 seasons. He has had some very productive games against Notre Dame this season. He had 33.5 DraftKings points and was one of the lowest owned best plays of that slate, and very few people had him at all. But he's going to be the guy. Jalen Poe is a guy that has played 2 games for them. He was very good in both games, but he's been hurt since then. I don't think he's going to play in this one, if I had to guess. Gavin Williams is the backup to Ontario Brown, but he's just seeing super inconsistent usage. He went from having 29 carries against Bowling Green, 16 carries against Toledo, to 1 against Ball State. And, Toledo and Ball State were games where Ontario Brown both played. So I don't get why he went from so many carries to so little carries. Obviously, the Bowling Green game, there was no Ontario Brown, but 16 carries against Toledo to 1 against Ball State. I don't get why. Because I know that this team, I know how much they like to run the football. I think Williams, if I'm playing at 20 max lineups, Williams is going to make my player pool. But it's really hard to convince yourself to play him when Ontario Brown isn't significantly more expensive, and he significantly outsnapped him last game. At the wide receiver spot, these 2 teams have had banged up receivers all year long. So it's really hard to kind of get the pulse of what this, receiving production is going to look like for these 2 teams in this game. Trayvon Rudolph was last year the wide receiver 1 for Northern Illinois. We played him in MACtion all the time. He started off the season great with, 36 DraftKings points against Western Illinois. Has not had a good game since. He is back healthy now. He did miss a few games in between then. I don't know. If he's had a week and a half off, right? So if he is fully healthy, he's going to be this team's wide receiver 1. The problem is that he hasn't played like it, and DraftKings still hasn't priced like it. So you're kind of making a little bit of a conjecture, if you want to play Trayvon Rudolph, that he is going to gain that wide receiver 1 role back. Now, who has had that wide receiver 1 role? Well, it has been Cam Thompson, who last week against Ball State had 8 catches, 128 yards, and a touchdown. 29.8 DraftKings points was his best game of the season. He's been operating as the wide receiver 1 in Trayvon Rudolph's stead. Travis Rudolph played at Florida State back in the day. I'm at a point of the night where I'm really tired and I'm confusing names and confusing college football players. But Cam Thompson, for Northern Illinois, has been operating as the wide receiver 1. And really, if I'm playing this game, I would want to play one of Rudolph or Thompson. I probably wouldn't play them both together. I probably would not double stack quarterback Ethan Hampton, but one of those 2 guys is very likely to have the big game from his receiving room. And then the other 3 that play regular snaps is the tight end, Grayson Barnes, and then the other 2 receivers, Andrew McElroy and Dane Partridge, do play a lot of snaps. You can consider them, but it's really hard to talk yourself into them when Thompson and Rudolph aren't that much more expensive, but has significantly better profiles. On the Western Michigan side, they are quarterbacked by Hayden Wolf. He is solid, just solid. In MAC play, he's been between 16 and 20 fantasy points in all 4 of his MAC games. Just solid. Doesn't give you any rushing upside. He's going to need multiple touchdowns to hit value, but he can do it because we've seen him do it. He's also the cheapest of the 4 starting quarterbacks on this slate. Here's the bad news. Northern Illinois statistically ranks as one of the best pass defenses in the nation, giving up only 159 passing yards per game. They've played quite a weak slate of quarterbacks. I mean, Riley Leonard is not a polished passer. CJ Bailey of NC State, not a polished passer. Some of these MAC teams, not polished passers that Northern Illinois has played. So, yeah, that's a little bit, it would not look as good schedule adjusted, but this is still a defense where the pass defense is one of their strengths. And Western Michigan's a team that's going to love to run the football. They rank 22nd in the nation in rush rate. So there's not, to me, a ton of upside for Hayden Wolf. But if you're just looking for a 15 to 20 fantasy point outing, which is probably, it could very well be more than what Ethan Hampton and Tommy Ulatowski put up, then, yeah, you can absolutely play him. And like I said, he's going to make my player pool. I don't think he's my favorite of the other 3, but he's going to make my player pool for sure. Now, at the running back, this team does truly have a 3-headed monster. Jaden Nixon is the most productive back this season. He's had some huge games in MAC play. He's been over 22 DraftKings points in 3 of the 4 games, and he's done it on 14 carries or less in all 4 of those games. So he is dependent on efficiency, not volume. But like I said, it's a 3-headed monster. None of these guys are going to see a ton of volume. The fact that they do rush the ball, one of the highest rates in the country, though, does give them enough rushing volume to support 3 backs. Jalen Muckley was their lead back last year. Was their lead back at the start of the season, was great against Wisconsin. I believe that was a Friday night slate, and I played a lot of them because I was not a believer in Wisconsin's rush defense. And he had 21 DraftKings points in that game, 21 DraftKings points against Kent State. He was banged up in the middle of the season and didn't play a whole lot. Now he's back. There's a possibility he could take over as this team's RB1, which, like I said, he had been the last 2 seasons. So I absolutely am going to be playing some Jaden Buckley here on this slate. And then Zahir Abdus-Salam is also a guy who is consistently being involved in the game plan. In MAC play, he has been over 5 carries in each of the last 4 games. He is also their receiving back. And he's also quite cheap at 4,200. So all 3 of these guys are going to make my player pool. I'm definitely interested in playing them. I'm not playing 2 of them in the same lineup, but we know this is a team that's going to run the football. We know this is a team that's going to use all 3 of these guys. I can make myself convincing arguments that all 3 of them can have a big game. With Nixon, it would just be the fact that maybe he's just the best one and has been the best one. With Buckley, it's the fact that he was the RB1 last year. With Abdus-Salam, it's the receiving work and maybe they trail. I can talk myself into all 3 of these running backs. At the wide receiver spot, Blake Bosma, the tight end, has actually been the most productive wide receiving option this season. He's been super consistent, just a really solid option at $4,500 on DraftKings. I do like him as a play. The reason why he's been the most productive, though, hasn't necessarily been because he's like this unguardable tight end like Harold Fannin, Bowling Green, or anything like that. It's because the top 2 wideouts for Western Michigan are Anthony Sambucci and Kenneth Womack, and both of them have been banged up. Through the middle of the season, Sambucci had some big games because of Womack being hurt, and now Sambucci is hurt and Womack is back. Kenneth Womack last year in MAC play had some massive, massive games, and so I'm kind of willing to roll the dice on him and just, maybe he breaks a long touchdown. Maybe he breaks 2 long touchdowns. He's caught 22 passes this season and only scored once. I kind of think he's due for some touchdown regression. I think he's a really solid boom or bust receiving option. I'm really not considering anybody other than Sambucci, Womack, and Bosma for this team at the wide receiver position. And Sambucci, you're going to have to check the status of because he did miss their last game. Just because this is a team that's not going to have a ton of passing volume. And really, if they do, it's going to be between those 3 guys. So not really considering any of the ancillary pieces for that Western Michigan passing attack. All right, but that is going to do it for this Wednesday night MACtion slate. Like I said, if you had not checked out the Tuesday night slate, make sure you go check that out. But hopefully we gave you guys all the information that you need to build some winning DFS lineups for this MACtion slate. Like I said, I love this time of year. I love MACtion. If this video helped you out in any way, please hit the like button. It really does help me out a ton when you guys do that. If you're listening on audio, please rate and review. Cannot stress enough how helpful it is for me when you guys do. But y'all, it is approaching midnight my time. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I just talked about 4 MACtion games, which I love MACtion. It's a little tiring. So I'm going to go ahead and get on out of here. Best of luck to you guys on the Tuesday and the Wednesday MACtion slates. Come check out our Saturday main slate and night slate previews later in the week. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this point, and I will see you guys next time.